Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, when I finished reading the Sunday papers, I knew you were going to laugh. When one reads the weekend papers in South Africa, that's often the image that you get. A South Africa that appears to be in trouble. We have many problems. For example, at the moment, this year, South Africa has got an average growth rate of 1.7%. The average global growth rate this year is about 5.6%, 3.7%. The average growth rate for Africa is 5.6%. So South Africa is growing at half the rate of the rest of the world, and we are growing much, much slower than the rest of Africa. That's not where we want to be. That's where we want to be. We want to be in a South Africa that paints a very different picture of a hole in the ground. We want to aspire. So I want to take you on a journey. And that journey is really where South Africa could be. Now, we do, at the Institute for Security Studies where I work, we do forecasting. Now, forecasting is not prediction. It's a tool to help us understand the future. And in our case, we use the International Futures Forecasting System, which is a computer-based, data-heavy system to look at the future, based at the University of Denver. And we use scenarios. We paint a picture of where we are today to where we could be. We route where we are going in current reality, so that where we go are realistic options. Now, to start off, we have to frame the world. What is the rest of the world going to look like? And what I present behind me are average growth rates. And these growth rates are for the next 15 years, average growth rate of the European Union, 28 countries, of about 1.2%. The United States of about 1.8%. The world average, 3.4%. Africa, 5.7%, average growth rate across Africa, 55 countries. China, about 8.2%. But look at the last column. The average growth rate of Southern Africa, if you take South Africa out of Southern Africa, an amazing 8.5%. We live in the region that is going to have the highest growth rate on average going forward for the next 15, 20 years. So, if we are to take the scenarios that we developed at the Institute, start in 2014, and we look at our base case forecast, which we called Bafana Bafana, after our well-known South African national soccer team. This is, where the team dribbles along, pass a lot. We don't really score any goals. There's no clear leadership. We don't really go forward. An alternative pathway could be a nation divided. This is where a governing ANC is concerned about what's happening, particularly on the left wing with the economic freedom fighters and others, and adopts populist policies, land reform, redistribution, but at tremendous long-term costs. A third scenario could be what we refer to as Mandela Magic. Now, we have modeled Mandela Magic on the implementation of the National Development Plan out to 2030. We are more or less at the moment somewhere between Bafana Bafana and nation divided, in our view. I've said that we've modeled the future on trying to implement, particularly Mandela Magic, on the National Development Plan 2030. The National Development Plan was put together by 26 commissioners. It is 485 pages, and that's what I do at night. I read these 485 pages. But it's not the only plan. It was approved in September of 2012, and it's been adopted by Cabinet, by Parliament, and of course it's open to various interpretations. The latest interpretation is that it's radical economic transformation. But it's not the only plan that South Africa has. We've got a new growth path, we've got an infrastructure plan, and we've got an industrial policy action plan. A plethora of plans and ambitions of how we are going to take our country forward. Now, we have in South Africa this year a growth rate of about 1.7%. We have a total GDP of about 3.5 trillion rand and GDP per person of about 109,000 rand. Bafana Bafana, our current pathway, in which, by the way, we've built in fracking because we believe it's going to happen, whether you want it to happen or not, but it's going to boost the South African economy, pushes your economic growth rate to about 3.8% average. It gives us a GDP of about 6.6 trillion rand and a GDP by 2030 of about 145,000 rand per person. In other words, the South African economy is almost twice this, about $3 trillion bigger by 2030 than it is at the moment. Nation divided, we still grow. Under all scenarios, South Africa grows because we have an exceptional, we're in a sweet spot, demographic dividend next to this region that's going to grow so high. So even under nation divided, we grow. We have an average growth rate of 2.6%. We have by 2030 a GDP of about 5.5 trillion compared to the 3.5 trillion today. We have a GDP per person of about 127,000. But compare that to Mandela Magic, where we could be. Mandela Magic speaks of a growth rate of 5.1% on average, which is very difficult to achieve. It gives us a GDP of $8.2 trillion, rand, I wish it was dollars. A GDP per person of about 166,000 rand, a significant improvement on where South Africa is today. Now, South Africans have very different views on the country. Some believe it's a glass half full, it's a glass half empty, it's a point of view. If you take the glass half full point of view, then we've just had elections. And the result of those elections is a government that is certainly reaching out and is certainly much more responsive and accountable to what it ever was before. Quite strange what a bit of a 2 or 3% drop in ratings can do. We also have a parliament that is much more representative. The best news is that the economic freedom fighters are in parliament. A constituency that is not represented in parliament is now part of parliament. Very important, and for reasons that I'll also come to. We have a government that appears to remain committed to the National Development Plan. They've just, a few weeks ago, published the medium-term strategic framework, which sets out the next 5 years for South Africa, 2014 to 2019, for the implementation of the National Development Plan. It'll be followed by another 5 and another 5 years plan. And then we have a public protector. Baby, that is an impressive woman. And we have a judiciary that keeps Parliament, that holds ourselves to account. It reports to Parliament, but it even holds the presidency to account. Of course, you can take the point of view that the glass is half empty. Crime rates are certainly, unfortunately, peaked in 2002, have come down, but we expect crime rates to actually slowly increase again as they did last year. We've just emerged from a winter of discontent, really massive strikes that have done South Africa a significant amount of damage, both our domestic growth rates as well as with regard to investor confidence. We live in a region that is growing faster than we are growing. So investors are looking at South Africa and they're saying we're rather going to invest further north. And then we have a large bloated cabinet with overlapping mandates and policies that do not appear coherent. The recent regulations on immigration, what Home Affairs announced, is the best example of this. But South Africa is poised for change. And that change comes in various forms. I'm going to speak politically by first speaking about the changes in the tripartite alliance. COSATU and the South African Communist Party are no longer as powerful as they used to be. Particularly, COSATU has lost a significant amount of influence. The ANC is free to set the course, but the ANC can no longer only rely on its liberation credentials. People are voting not on what their parents are saying, but on policy. And this is the big change that is happening, apart from the leadership challenges that we will come to. Voters are also changing. Young voters are apathetic in one sense, but they are the tide that are going to carry South Africa into the next elections, 2019, 2024, and 2029. And what is going to happen? Are they going to vote, and for whom are they going to vote? They certainly are voting on policy. And in the opposition, we saw that the Democratic Alliance, every election, has been able to make substantive gains. Will they be able to continue by the leadership transition and the policy evolution that is required? So South Africans have not yet seen change, but politically we are set for change. And it's also clear from some of the indices that we need to change. Now let's look at a few key dates going forward. The first key date, probably is 2016, when we have local government elections in South Africa. We expect those elections to be quite violent. Why do I say that? Because we have not only in Gauteng, which the DA is seeing as its next possible province to control, intense competition, but you also have the EFF. And this combination, together with other factors, is probably going to lead to quite a degree of violence in the 2016 elections. Then in 2017, we appoint a new president, or the ANC appoints a new president for the ANC, who will become the new leader of South Africa. Who is that person going to be? In 2019, we have again elections, and those elections will be elections that will determine where particularly if we are headed for a true two-party system, and where the ANC is going to go. And we have again, as I've indicated, elections 2024, 2029. But South Africa faces three triple challenges that you all would have heard over and over again. The first of this is poverty. Now, this graph shows what would happen under the three scenarios that I've spelled out to you, which I've not explained in any detail. So on the left-hand side, you've got the number of poor people. These are people that live on 14 Rand a day, which is the international benchmark, about $1.25. About 7 million South Africans live on 14 Rand a day in South Africa. Under a nation divided, you see how initially the poverty rate comes down, similar as what happened in Zimbabwe. You do populist policies, but you pay for that down the line. So that by 2030, under nation divided, you have about 6.4 million South Africans. In the meanwhile, our population has increased. 6.4 million South Africans out of a total population of our estimate of about 66 million South Africans by 2030 that live in absolute poverty. Whereas in Bafana Bafana, about 5.5 million, and under Mandela Magic, about 4.3 million South Africans. So the choices we make today have a dramatic impact on the future and on our children. Unemployment is our second big challenge. 75% of our labor force are black, of which 41% are unemployed. 41%. This is the expanded definition. That is unsustainable. Compare that to the 8% of our labor force. Labor force is people from 15 to 60 years of age that are white, of which 11% are unemployed. This creates a dramatic tension in our society. Race and class coincide. We also face huge inequality challenges in South Africa. Some would argue this is our biggest challenge. Income inequality impedes long-term growth. It is associated with poorer health outcomes. It generates political instability. It contributes to higher rates of violence and basically undermines the capacity of collective decision-making, which is extremely important for South Africa going forward. But while this may appear to be a bit of a bad news story, it's important to underline that in the period from 2001 to 2011, 10 million South Africans moved into middle income status based on living standard measurements. That is 1 million South Africans every year. There are many reasons for this, but one of the main achievements of the South African government has been the extent to which it has been able to alleviate deep-seated poverty. Will we be able to sustain that momentum? So you can make up your own mind whether the glasses are full or the glasses are empty. But our argument is that the most important thing for South Africa is simply economic growth. We need to grow the economy. And that is important because only growth can lift people from social grants into employment. And only if you are in employment can you really escape poverty. The nature of that growth is therefore extremely important. And because of the high levels of inequality that we have in our society, government needs to regulate and to help with redistribution in South Africa. If you don't have a strong and a capable government, you cannot grow sustainably. But at the end of the day, only the private sector can create the jobs and the momentum for that growth. So while the road ahead may appear quite simple, it's a straight road, there are many challenges, and government is not easy. It is extremely complicated and difficult. Now we believe, and I've made briefly the argument, that our road to the future is this Mandela Magic But it's not one road. There could be two pathways to this. One that we refer to as multi-party democracy, and the other one is the future as ANC. Under multi-party democracy, you see competitive politics intruding into our politics. You see the DA doing much better, taking Gauteng, etc. Under the future as ANC, the ANC remains the governing party. It reforms and it manages South Africa. The quality of democracy is quite different under these two scenarios, but both can deliver a growth rate of 5.1% per annum or a GDP that's much, much larger than where we are today. Let's say that this is 2029 and you are the chairperson of the Independent Electoral Commission and you walk out or you announce on Twitter or whatever it is by then, the latest election results. You could announce a South Africa that says on the one side, the ANC have got 249 seats and the Democratic Alliance 89 seats, but that the DA only still controls 2 provinces and the rest are all controlled by the ANC. Or alternatively, under the rise of multi-party democracy, you could tweet or whatever, that the ANC has lost its majority. It's got 172 seats. The Democratic Alliance are the majority party. The DA govern most of the provinces, except for Limpopo, Mpumalanga, and KwaZulu-Natal, which the ANC still control, and the Eastern Cape, which the ANC controls with a left-wing party. So different futures can present the same economic result and the same prosperous future for us. So what do we need to do to make Mandela Magic? The first thing that I've argued is that we need to implement and cohere around the National Development Plan. Not that it's perfect, but it is a basis, the best basis that we have to take us forward. Then we need to work on our social compact. South Africans need to recreate the momentum that we had on national reconciliation under Mandela. We lost that with Mbeki, with Zuma. We need to come together if we are going to create this new South Africa. We need to grow the economy. Only economic growth, sustained long-term economic growth can alleviate these triple challenges that I've referred to. And we need to fix government. Do not think that we can govern South Africa through a private sector alone. You need to have a capable government at local, provincial, and national level that can make our growth sustainable and regulate the role of the private sector and transfer growth into sustainable growth. And finally, in our view, we need to reclaim political accountability. Every day in the newspapers, we read about Nkandla and every other example that you would like to refer to. We believe we need to make voting mandatory. Yes, you can have an item on your ballot that says none of the above, if you don't like any of their parties, but South Africans need to claim ownership of South Africa. And we need to move towards a more constituency-based system, particularly at national level, so that we know who our members of parliament are. If we institute these reforms, amongst many other measures, we believe that it will be possible to live to that dream of South Africa of the future. Thank you very much.